The poem is by Lindsay Donovan. The title is Bloodguilt. So why did you pick that one?
So I think when I read Lindsay's poem, I think immediately I was just kind of personally taken because of where I grew up. I grew up about 7 miles from a nuclear power plant in the Northwest, and there indeed was a lake on that property. And so there's just kind of this really relatable image for me right at the start that is just so evocative in so few words. So I was just like, first line, I was immediately sucked in. And what I appreciated as I went through was this, it's so like squirmy, squirrely, exploding, pus, like all of these like things that are happening that are kind of like really uncomfortable, but the language that's getting used to describe it is so beautiful. And I thought that was a really nice tension in this particular poem. And then I also very much appreciated at the end, like where it leaves off with, it's like pretty dark, but like the most hopeful dark one could like maybe, you know, hope to have. And so in these days where we're kind of confronting what apocalypse looks like every few hours or, you know, every news cycle or so, I really just kind of appreciated that tone, that like, I don't know, like the possibility in that, even though it's so dark there at the end. So that's what I'll leave y'all with to jump off of, and we'll come back with more.
Great, yeah. Any takers on this one to add a little bit?
Go for it, Chris.
You go ahead.
I was just the lines. We heard them screech as they emerged, their glass wings shuddering, flicking off specks of sand like minuscule landmines. Minuscule landmines bursting. I think all my senses are engaged in this poem. I feel like I'm zooming in, I'm on the lips of a lake, and then I'm looking down at the ground, and then there's a figure approaching, and it feels really cinematic, but I'm in it. And the texture in those lines makes me itch, you know, like and worry about the stepping on the glass, and you know, both because of like the bees are fragile and also broken glass is, you know, sort of threatening, like just the textures are very ominous. And when I was reading it, I felt like I was waiting for, like it was, some of the structures were set up making me anticipate a natural phenomenon. Like, you know, that your classic poem would be, you know, delivering, you know, bees with glass-like wings, but surely not glass. And that there was this sort of way that the poem kept playing with my expectations and delivering this like unnatural phenomenon after unnatural phenomenon that I enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely would agree with all of that. Ash, I apologize when I blipped out. The line I was going to mention was choose and trust your collaborators. And that's when this collaborator completely shit the bed in terms of his technological setup. But I love the poem, so I apologize if I've been blipping in and out. With this particular poem, Bloodguilt, I have two tracks playing in my head. One is trying to look at the literal situation, because I think I have interpretation, and I want to hear what you guys have to say, what you think is actually happening. And then I have a whole series of kind of metaphorical or Jungian implications, and I'm not sure I'm right about either one, and I kind of like that. Sometimes it's obvious what the situation is, literally the concretes of the poem's architecture. You say, here's the situation that's happening. Okay, got it. And in this case, I think I got it, but I'm not sure. Does anybody else want to chime in on what you think the actual scene is here?
I'll step back because I've read the author's explanation already.
So that's unfair. If you could remember. Well, let me give you mine first. I think, and I could, this is where I'm happy to be 100% wrong. It seems like parents sitting out on a porch watching their kid stomping fireflies or some such and having mixed ethical, moral feelings about it, which kind of leads to the larger existential questions. So I get initially there's this imagery that has the, like you said, Ash, the popping and the squirming and the visceral, the vitriol of it, and then I see them with the beer stuck to their hands, just kind of sitting back, looking at each other, and then the kid looks back while he's stomping, and so yeah, I kind of picture that scene of two parents getting a little boozed up and watching the kid stomp on fireflies. That's before I get to any of the metaphorical stuff.
I feel like I'm curious about where the kid comes from for you. Because I feel like there's.
Yeah,
Right, so little pops under his feet like squirming cherry bombs, and let's see, when he looks back, where there's a line where he looks back with a, there it is, Bottleby's. He looked up and backwards at me with a cracked smile, and I'm picturing a little kid with a magnifying glass and the ants. He looks at, and he doesn't really know if what he's doing is good or bad, but the parents are kind of watching at an awkward distance, wondering about the ethical implications of what their kid's doing.
I feel like
And,
there's so much sexual tension in this poem for me between the two characters. And so there's like not really children present.
I wouldn't have really maybe articulated it if I just looked at this poem and like offered an interpretation, but I do order the pieces in the issue, and the visual art piece I placed right before this kind of gets to a little bit of the childhood vibe. It's shout out to Alicia Kimball and her painting. It's called "The Storm, Where Shall We Hide?" So obviously it's not meant to be a literal like kind of like pairing. They weren't created together or anything with any connection, but at least in the impression that it made on me, there did seem to be something. Obviously there's something foreboding. The storm, where shall we hide, in the title, and the piece is a little bit kind of creepy, the painting, so it can maybe just kind of the I don't know, the emotional subjective reading of it. There's obviously a connection in there somewhere for me. So yeah, I don't have like a direct, maybe pinpoint interpretation involving kids and childhood and that scene. But yeah, I think there's something there.
One question I'm curious about how you guys wrestle with is the italics, these sort of voices that come in, and so we have this, they can hardly fly, little minor bugs, through the smog, no substance, greedy, beautiful things. He stepped enough to shatter their wings. Is this the stomper, talking, I guess, is one thing, one way I could see it. And then we have this, they retreated, we're humbling the bottle bees, which I love that line, partially just because of the sounds, the humbling the bottle bees, there's this sort of like, very, very soft, those B's and M's. And this sort of like conquering the landscape sort of feel, like, I don't know, I get like sort of like intrepid sci-fi hero vibe for a moment there, but also like, you know, Chris, when you were sharing the sort of story or scene, uh, I was like, okay, this is really interesting to hear. And Ash, I was sort of with you on, I was seeing two people in the landscape more often. And yet, I think that was one of the joys and challenges of the poem, is its tendency not to resolve. Like it doesn't sort of click into place neatly. It feels sort of like broken glass, looking through broken glass to me. And so that was like, or the chipped china plates kind of, that was a good frustration for me, like a good irritant as I read.
Yeah, that's one of the balances I like so much, is where you're drawn into something, you find yourself more curious about something that's maybe difficult to understand, or that's either confusing or just not clear. So yeah, obviously that's part of the beauty of poetry and the figurative writing. So yeah, I think this one hits that. So if you will, I can share some of Lindsay's thoughts. So she had a couple of comments, she kind of bullet pointed them, so I'll kind of take a run through. So in Lindsay's words, I wrote the first draft of this poem in college, and that was about 5 years ago at this point, while taking a prose poetry course with the phenomenal Peter Shippey. He's a poet and professor at Emerson College, and I adored him as an artist and teacher. She goes on to say he was and is this snappy, wise, and weathered punk who was always very gentle with other people's writing. While diving deep into other writers, I wrote Bloodguilt, totally absorbed with Matea Harvey, a dark surrealist prose poem queen. She has poems called Whack-a-Mole, Realism, and The Inside Out Mermaid, to give you an idea. Her book of poems, If the Tabloids Are True, What Are You?, is a well-loved and dog-eared addition to my bookshelf. So a poet I'm not familiar with, I did take a quick peek at her work today. So that's one I'll have to bookmark for later. Back to Lindsay's words, the first line I wrote for the poem is literally the first line, which never happens for me. My usual process is one line comes out of the depths, and then I build a poem around the line or idea. It's exciting when it actually ends up being at the very top. She has some concepts of the poem as we get kind of to the more abstract qualities. So she questions, our trash never really leaves us. What if our pieces of trash became separate beings? The merging of organic and inorganic. What if life can be born out of garbage or pollution? In this sense, I viewed the piece as an alternate reality to our true impact on the earth. That is, we are polluting it and it's dying, and there is no life being born from it. So the alternate reality being, what if this kind of life forms emerged? Lindsay's words again, the poem felt inquisitory, dreamy, but also a little dark. She continues, some nuclear perversion that didn't just kill us, but made us suffer in a parallel universe where things are opposite, as if what if bees didn't fly? What if we could collect light? What are moon calves, she asks. The relationship between the speaker and the other person is a complicated reflection of the world they inhabit. Toxic. The speaker gets a form of blood guilt. There's being a secondary guilt one feels from watching pain inflicted, from bloodshed. They're confused, but they're also cruel in their own ways. Of course, when does a poem become a prose poem is an important question to ask yourself. And I felt the sounds in this poem can be so rich, it felt nice to bury them in more. They pop out through the debris, just like the bottle bees. Hybrid elements of crafts, hybrid insects, therefore hybrid poetry. So she goes on to comment a little bit on the title and just to add that blood guilt refers to the liability for punishment for shedding blood. The biblical concept of blood guilt derives from the belief that deeds generate consequences and that sin in particular is a danger to the sinner. But also in this particular dictionary I read once and now cannot find again, mentioned it specifically for being the guilt after being bloodthirsty in war, question mark. Maybe she can't find the dictionary again. So she liked the word and she kind of related it to the way the word feels in your mouth, I guess when spoken. So that's a little bit of behind the scenes, which I love, of course. And so we do get some of that kind of more abstracted kind of content and kind of some interesting twists along the way.
I want it known for the record that usually I'm the one that super overreads for romance relationship dynamics in poems. And this is the one where I've completely missed it. And that's good. Maybe that says something about me. I might be entering a new phase of my life.
Well, you're saved by when she does say the relationship between the speaker and the other person is complicated. So there's layers. She said it, it's complicated. So safe to say, you know a thing or two about complicated relationships. There's a lot of layers to them. And yeah, so it's not too far. I wouldn't say too far.
Yeah, there's this sort of intimacy between in the we that is intriguing to me. And three lines that I pulled, because we don't get a ton of repetition in this poem. And so I think that sort of like was calling my attention the times that we did have this repeated. So we have this, we thought it strange to reflect light, but not collect it. As if like, of course, on the planet that me and my attached twin lover human are from, we collect light. Duh. Or we thought it strange to kiss someone but not use tongue. That sort of feels a little bit more grounded, than I felt like I was getting some more like intimacy that I could recognize. And then there's this really weird one. We still think it's strange to wear a cross and not know what it means, because this is so futuristic. And I mean, it's interesting hearing Lindsay talk about having some Bible concepts floating around in her brain as she was doing this, because I didn't pick up on that at all. And maybe that helps me make a little bit of sense of the cross, but it also feels, I feel on the outside of the we when I read that statement, that, oh, this we has some code about what crosses mean, or has some culture or some understanding, and I'm observing. And I think that's part of why this reads as so alien as a poem. So anyway, yeah, that's the sort of like patterns that happen between those three lines are something that I appreciate. And I think part of what brings the intimacy alive and also the strangeness alive, because I feel my distance from that we.
Yeah, I feel like in that kind of complex relationship too, so much of the title comes through for me, because it feels clear that the we are in on something together, but the speaker is maybe still feeling more guilty about it than the other person that the speaker is with in the poem, So it's like they've decided to step over to that side, but they're like, but what does that really mean? Like, what have I committed to here? Like, am I really okay with going all the way down this path, like you are, like I'm watching you do? And that I felt like just like was done really beautifully in like the subtext of the poem in a really nice way. And then I just wanted to agree with Chris too, that like my favorite parts were like being okay with the unresolvedness, which is like not an easy thing to do. And I just thought it was so brilliant to like end in this line of never bloomed, right? Because there's like all this potential happening over and over that never lands. And you're like, oh, this last line's not gonna land either. Cool. Like that's a 10, stuck it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's yeah, I think we got a lot of good stuff out of that one. And even just a quick note on the formatting, me and Lindsay went back and forth a little bit just because the way the formatting was on a full page on the screen kind of had to shift a bit to get on the either on the website version or the PDF version. Either one, it was going to get screwy. So there was some, question of where is the line break in this kind of prose poem. Some of the lines are intentionally broken and some of them are let go. So that was, partially intentional and something that kind of came, just as a necessity of formatting.